Should be 1 million followers any minute now.
One is logging in right now.
Oh, there you go. See? All right. So let's carefully record.
Okay, so it's almost 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Last week I gave a scenario of kind of a annoyance, how annoyance arises or could arise in your meditation. So this week I'm going to do a different kind of scenario, one that is how a pleasant sensation could arise in your meditation. And to show really that you handle them the same way. Either, whichever comes up, is always the same basic process that you use to work with it. So I'm going to use a scenario where somebody has said something that you found very kind and complimentary. And so maybe it was at work, a coworker or your boss said something about what a great worker you are, or somebody said something to me about how great I'm doing teaching these classes, or something like that. So later on in the day, you're doing a meditation, and you're watching your breath, and the thought that keeps coming up is that you're replaying that scenario where somebody said something complimentary. So how does that show up? It would show up, if you're paying attention, it would show up as a very pleasant sensation. You could call it elation. You're feeling good because somebody said something good to you. Now, if you're just learning this meditation, you're not really getting all these little details at this point. What could happen is that elation comes up, and that kicks off a storyline about what a great whatever I am, and it's just sort of goes from there. So when you're sitting in meditation and this comes up, how do you work with it? Any ideas how you would deal with that? Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to give it space. We talked about if you notice the elation come up, the storyline has started, you notice the elation come up. The first thing you can do is note elation has arisen. And this is, instead of noting, I am elated. You're creating space from it by noting it as elation has arisen. So this is, remember when we first started these classes, we talked about the 3 marks of existence, the impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and not self. Well, this is a little bit of the not self element right there. When you created that space from the arising sensation, you've given it that space and you've separated from this self sort of preoccupation. So you're sitting in meditation, the elation comes up, the thought comes up, you note elation has arisen. The next thing to notice is how that storyline starts from that. Because if it's something pleasant, the typical storyline that's going to start up will be, how do you keep that going? How do you make that your normal thing that you're going to continue to sort of propagate? And so there's a story that's going up about, okay, so I am, whatever the compliment was, this is what I am, it makes me feel good, I want to keep that going. So you're going to create an image of yourself. If it's me and somebody said something nice about my teaching, then I create this image of myself as this great teacher, and then I'm going to want to keep that going. But if you're getting good at your meditation, you notice this starting up, you recognize the pattern. You recognize what's coming up, and you just note it. This image or something like that. So again, you're separating from it. So I said there's 3 steps you can go through in this kind of a process. The first is that disidentification, which we did with the elation has arisen versus I am elated. The second is what I'd call disinvestment. The story has come up, but then you recognize it as a story. It's not the truth. It's not the reality. It's not what's really there. Because what I have started to say to myself in this story is that if I create this image of myself as this great whatever, that's going to make me happy. And if you've been doing this for a while, maybe you can recognize as soon as that comes up, that's not true. So the next step after that is the one that I've called disenchantment, where you recognize it's not true, and then you can let it go. And your mind goes off in a different direction where you recognize that this method of being happy is not a successful strategy to true happiness. And all of this happens like in a second. I'm describing it in length here, but in actual fact, in your meditation, as you do this practice, what you're developing is the skill to do this kind of seeing. And remember, we always said, when one sees with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. So this is what you're seeing with wisdom. This is it. The disidentification, the separating from the self, the recognizing the storyline as a storyline, not reality, and then the disenchantment or disillusionment with that storyline, where you're letting it go. So, and the point is that when I described the scenario last week, which was annoyance came up because something your roommate did or somebody else did something, you got annoyed, you would have gone through exactly the same process. Nothing is different about how you handle it in your meditation. So, does anybody have any thoughts about this, about whether it works or whether it doesn't work? Or have you ever seen this kind of thing come up in your meditation? So how did it feel when this sort of stuff came up in meditation?
Felt good.
Felt good? Because you were seeing something that you didn't see before. And that's what this meditation is all about. That's why we're doing the noting. It's about seeing things that you weren't able to see before. Now, I just described a long scenario of that, but again, it's almost instantaneous over time as you do this practice. That this kind of seeing, not immediately, but over time, this kind of seeing actually happens. Any questions about anything I've said so far? Yes.
Was elation just an example? Is it all the same?
Yes, it's always the same. There are pleasant sensations, and then there are unpleasant sensations. But you deal with them in exactly the same way. So elation is, it could be, the thought was about a experience you had before with, you were on a vacation or something, and you had a very pleasant experience. And that keeps coming up. The point is that when something is pleasant comes up, the immediate thing that follows typically is the idea to how you hang on to that, how you perpetuate that.
But is it also true of the opposite? Because honestly, I don't know if this is an odd or unique experience, but I very rarely experience anything during my meditation that I would classify as pleasant or joyful or positive. I feel anxiety, I feel fear, whatever.
Yeah.
Or I feel sort of nothingness, but I don't ever feel any sort of great positive experience.
Well, each person's experience of meditation is different. And so some people will have any kinds of thought come up. And sometimes it is a memory of something that would happen before that was pleasant. Other times it's, as you say, it's anxiety, fear, or a just general feeling of unease or tension. A lot of people get into tension in meditation because they're trying too hard and they get a feeling of tension. But it's handled in exactly the same way. If something comes up that's unpleasant, like the scenario we had where you had a thought of something that happened before which annoyed you, and that annoyance has returned while you were meditating. It's the same thing. Annoyance has arisen. It's not I am annoyed, it's annoyance has arisen. You notice that this sensation of annoyance has arisen based on this thought. Now, in the case of an unpleasant, the impulse is to push it away, is to get rid of it. That's the difference. For the pleasant ones, you want to hang on to. For the unpleasant ones, you want to push them away. But in either case is a case of wanting. Either you're wanting something to go away or you're wanting something to stay. And the way the world works with impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and not self, it's very difficult to base happiness on successfully either holding on to things we like or pushing away things we don't like. So we have to find an alternative way of dealing with things besides always just trying to hold on to what we like and push away what we don't like. Does that answer your question?
With regards to his question, or his perspective, so the first thing that popped up in my mind was meditation, which is pleasant. I mean, generally, you're developing that sense of metta. So, not avoiding this, but since he's not had a pleasurable experience, wouldn't it be helpful to suggest the metta meditation so you can develop at least an enjoyable aspects of meditation?
Yeah, that would be. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because some people have talked to me about the metta meditation. I suggested people check out the Wednesday meditation session for metta, but a lot of people have told me that they can't make it here on weekday or evenings. So next week, I'm going to start doing metta meditation here, so we can cover that practice in this class as well for those who can't make Wednesday.
And just to follow up, so meditation, we are moving, in a way, it's like I suppose it's a skillful craving, right? Because we are creating a sense of, do you know what I mean? We're not just sitting and noticing, we're actually...
Yeah, but it's really important to note that the fact that something is pleasant does not make it a problem. Pleasant is good. We like pleasant. The problem is when you try to hang on to pleasant in ways that causes stress and struggle and suffering. Pleasant is just fine. I mean, I love pleasant sensations. I'm always happy to have them when they show up. As long as you can let them show up, experience them, and let them move on as they inevitably will without making it a struggle. And this process that we're talking about right now, where I was talking about a pleasant sensation, this is the process you use that allows you to experience something pleasant and also be able to let it move in whatever way it will. Yes?
Thanks for coming back, Bob.
Oh,
Been a
thank
year,
you.
right?
I'm glad to be back. I enjoy doing this.
I was going to comment on metta. So there's a teacher whose students have been here teaching on YouTube. Is Bhante
Vila Ramsa, I think his name is something.
Yeah, so he's really good at teaching pleasant meditation. So he calls it the puppy or kitten meditation. So in other words, it's for people that aren't allergic to puppies or kittens, it's very difficult to connotate negativity with a puppy or kitten. So I regularly go to the Humane Society and meditate in the kitten or the puppy and cat enclosures. And it works. So if you want to shift your tendencies and habits of negativity during meditation, I would seed it with something that's inherently pleasant for you, which for me is cats and puppies.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like if I can't think about a person that makes me feel it, I'll just think about dogs doggies.
It's so easy.
And like all of a sudden I'm like happy, or at least a little bit, yeah.
But you wanna get that habit going. You don't wanna do it once, you wanna do it like 30 times. And now you've got the habit of pleasant meditation going on. Once a week on Wednesday nights really isn't enough to establish a habit. A once a week event.
Well, no, I mean, all meditations that we talk about, we talk about establishing a daily practice. What we do here on Saturday or on a weekday night is just a little session to sort of give you some extra boost in the practice. But it has to be a almost daily habit of meditation for it to really be helpful in the way that we're talking about it here. So it has to be a regular practice. We've talked about it's helpful if you have a regular time that you practice and a regular place that you practice. I mean, these are not required, but if it's possible, if you can establish that, it's very helpful. So any other questions about what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, I've asked a question about metta before. I've asked, because metta, when I first tried metta, I said it didn't work for me at all. Like I said.
How'd you
how did
define
it-
work?
As in, I felt no good feeling, nor any sort of anything. I actually felt the opposite. I actually felt more ill will, actually, toward the people around me. I was trying to send them love or something, and I felt nothing like that. And I've asked, like, what do you do if you don't feel any sort of feeling? I've always done metta, and I mean, I'm more concentrated. I feel better in that way. As a concentration meditation, metta has worked for me. But in terms of feeling any sort of good feeling or anything
Well,
like that, it's never.
Have you tried different subjects, including yourself?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you get the same result with any subject?
Anything,
Even
yeah.
somebody who's like a benefactor to you, someone who's been very good to you? Or
I don't have anybody who's been like that.
Okay.
So, yeah. I think that's probably the problem.
Well, okay, well, like I say, next week we'll talk in length about metta meditation in here, and we can discuss some strategies for dealing with that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on
What's that?
that kind of metta meditation.
Well, I guess I remember the instruction that often resistance does come up, and that's okay. It's okay to experience that, and it's actually just the effort to try to focus on goodwill
Mhm.
that is helpful. But
Yeah, I wouldn't give up on it. I think it still has potential to be very helpful
Mm.
for you. A lot of meditation isn't necessarily easy in the beginning, but with persistence, most of them do come through. Any other questions or thoughts or? Yes?
I just have a thought that one of my favorite meditations is the forgiveness. I forgive myself. That's huge.
Mhm.
It just puts me at, because I have, guilt and all these other feelings. It's not necessarily about, like you said, becoming attached to the feeling, but I get a real sense of relief from that. So that's just, I follow there's a meditation on YouTube by Jack Cornfield that I just really like a lot.
Mhm.
On forgiveness, and that really helps me.
Yeah, I mean, metta meditation is just one type of a whole series of meditations which you can do with the same similar process of, repeating phrases and generating the feeling, like gratitude meditation and forgiveness meditation, as you said, and compassion meditation. There's all kinds, and they all work basically the same way, and they're all very helpful, very effective as you learn how to do them. And each person has their own issues to deal with, so that you can develop meditations that work with whatever issues that you have to work with. So, any other questions about what I said so far? Does it make any sense? I mean, does it sound like something that's doable, I guess is the question. Yeah.
basic
distraction is distraction, and you note it and then return to the breath.
You note it and return to the breath, but when you note it, if it's something particularly something that's persistent, that comes back again and again, it's really important to experience it, to give it some attention and really experience it. Like in this case, for this example that I was talking about, when you experience it, you would feel that elation. You would feel the pleasant sensation that was associated with that thought. But you would have to recognize that that pleasant sensation has a potential for generating a certain kind of associated thought which can go off and you can get caught up in that. So it's experiencing it without getting caught up in it is the skill that we're developing in this kind of meditation. So, any other questions from what we've done so far? Okay, so why don't we do some meditation? So get a position that's comfortable.
Really comfortable?
As comfortable as you can still stay awake, yes. Okay, so when we start meditation, the first thing is to kind of settle into whatever your posture is and sort of do a scan of your body and your mind and just see what's there as you start. There could be sounds going on. There's the temperature of the room. There are other kinds of sensations, such as the touch sensation of your body on whatever you're sitting on. And you can scan down and see if your body is relaxed, if your shoulders are relaxed, if your face is relaxed, if your jaw is relaxed. And just let everything be as easy as you can make it. You can try to imagine a string at the top of your head, which is sort of gently pulling your spine erect so that but at the same time relaxed, not stiff. Your chin is tucked in a little bit. And you're just settling in and getting comfortable. Now at some point you're going to notice that there's breathing going on. You allow your attention to sort of come to your breathing and find a place where you can watch your breathing, such as at the tip of your nose, on the upper lip, or at your abdomen or your chest. Some place where you can watch the breath go in and out. Comfortably watch it in a relaxed way. Whatever the breath is doing is just fine. You don't have to make it do any particular thing. You just notice what it's doing. It can be fast or slow, quiet or noisy, smooth or rough, whatever it is. Just let it be. stay with the breath. You can use a silent mental note, in on the in-breath, out on the out-breath. Just to hold you on the breath. But always being gentle, always being relaxed. Staying with breath. Other things come and go, thoughts and sensations. You just let them flow by and stay with the breath. Just a silent mental note of in on the in-breath and out on the out-breath. You know, there's something really strong that keeps coming up in your mind. You can drop the breath for a minute and go give some attention to that thought or feeling or whatever it is that keeps coming back. And note it and name it. Thinking, thinking, thinking. Feeling, feeling. Planning, planning. Worry, worry, whatever it is. Just give it a note. Experience it. And then let it fade and go back to your breath. So your breath is your anchor. You always go back to that. Keep yourself stable, settled in meditation. And you deal with other things that come up when they're strong and when they need your attention. Okay, you can open your eyes, come back to the class. So how'd that go? Any difficulties? Worked okay?
Daydreams
Daydreams?
and pleasant.
So you just note them, right?
When I find out that I'm daydreaming.
Well, that's always the case. Is there going to be a time when you're lost in thought, right? But at some point, you're going to wake up the fact that you're lost in thought, and then you go through the noting process. It doesn't matter how long you were gone. The process is still the same.
I noticed, so it's focused on the breath, different points. Like I would get lost in thought, you know. They're pretty strong, and I dealt with them, and I came back to the breath. When we came out of it, I realized I didn't know where I was. Like, I mean, I knew I came back, I was in the room, but the whole time, like, I was not here. I was like here, and here, but not here. Is that like, what's the deal with that? Is that beneficial, not good, like?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean
So
when you
like,
say you're...
my eyes are closed, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm focused on the breathing,
Mhm.
but like, I didn't hear anything. Like, I was so concentrated on the breath, all I felt was the sensations of the breath, and then the thoughts, you know? know, so it's, but this was gone.
That's fine, it doesn't matter.
That's okay, that's okay.
Yeah, it depends on the level of concentration that you have. And that's fine either way.
Okay.
I mean, you can be aware of your surroundings, you're aware of sounds coming and going, or not, but either way is fine.
It was like in the background, but it was
Yeah.
like way in the background.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and the more you get concentrated, which is what happens is you just focus on the breath over a period of time. Typically your breath sort of slows down a little bit, gets a little quieter, and you get more concentrated. And you may start to see some sensations that are associated with concentration, like some people get sort of like a luminous cloud that's sort of going in front of, although their eyes are closed, they're seeing this light sort of circulate in front of their eye. These are all just sort of side effects of concentration. They're fine, or, you know, they're just what they are. But they don't have any impact on the meditation particularly. You can note them.
Yeah.
Concentration, concentration. And
I
that's,
just didn't know if like getting like so that you kind of lose sight of where you are.
it's fine.
That's okay. Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so, like I say, it just depends on what level of concentration you get to.
Yeah,
Yes.
question about that. So I've gotten different advice about this. So there's a light called the blue pearl. So if I'm concentrated and it's getting blissful, the blue pearl shows up in front. And I can actually use my mind to cultivate it and become very blissful. So if I focus on the blue pearl bliss, it can become very strong. But there's a lot of Buddhist teachers that don't want me doing that. They don't want me cultivating bliss as an escape from reality, essentially. They would rather that I not be attached to that.
Well, I mean, I think that the kind of meditation that we're really talking about in here with the noting and
Different.
it's really different.
Yeah.
So the purpose is different. It ultimately does achieve, you know, bliss in the same way, but in a different way. It's bliss from seeing reality.
As opposed to trying to escape it with the blue pearl.
Well, I don't know about escape is the right word, but it is, you're not really dealing with your thoughts and your habits of thought and things like that.
Yeah, are we really talking about namitas, like in the Sudhamagga?
Yeah.
That we're talking about like all the different cloud-like formations,
Yeah,
salt
that's-
cotton and all this stuff?
You know,
we're
any
talking
of that
about?
is possible if
Yeah.
you're doing a meditation which generates concentration. But I just leave that aside in this class. What I am teaching people to do is to stay in contact with what's going on in their body and mind. And just, this is sort of insight meditation which is interested in having you get really acquainted with the way your mind works. And you do that by noting the kind of things that come up in your mind when you're meditating and how you work with those things to gain some insight into your mind. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
But it's important when we start off the meditation that we spend a period of time, 10 minutes or so, depending on how long your total meditation session is, but there's some time where you're really settling in and establishing some level of concentration. So, because that brings some clarity to your mind when you're seeing these things happening. If you have some level of concentration, you can see more clearly what's going on. Yes?
I have a question about open awareness meditation. Is that okay to ask about that, or is
Sure.
that totally off topic?
No, that's,
So I just got introduced to that last week, and I may not have enough instruction right now to really know what I'm doing, but it was really hard for me. I thought it was interesting, but it was hard for me to. There isn't seeming much concentration. It's much less concentrated, and it was kind of like the instruction was just.
so you're not doing any noting, you're not doing anything, you're just seeing what comes up and just letting it being aware of it as it comes up? Is that the open awareness that you're referring to?
Yeah, there's no focal point.
Yeah, and for most people, that's a very difficult meditation.
Mm.
Having the anchor of the breath keeps people sort of stabilized. And if you do what you're describing, it's a very interesting meditation, but it's also a very difficult meditation. Or at least for me, I found it very difficult because I just get lost. And so the reason that I have sort of tended to work on the kind of meditation that I'm talking about here is because I've been able to get more stable doing that, using the anchor as sort of a home base. And then you can go off and experience things, but the more you go off and experience things, the more you tend to get scattered and distracted, and then you need a home base to come back to in order to restabilize, and then you can go off and do stuff again. But I have never been able to meditate without having that sort of anchor.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people, I've actually heard a lot of people talking about open awareness. I'm interested that you mentioned it now because I've heard it several times recently, people talking about doing that kind of meditation.
Isn't open awareness essentially trying to jump to the fourth jhana?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, open awareness is just, my understanding of it is just being with what is coming up without noting, without doing all these. The things like noting, they're just tools that we use to help us do the same thing as open awareness does, but it makes it possible to not get scattered.
Yeah.
So, I may be speaking of open awareness in a different way than somebody else is using the term. I don't know. But that's what I consider open awareness, is when you're not using an anchor, you're not using a...
Yeah, I've tried open awareness, but usually I do some mixture because it's too hard.
Well, I have found it hard when I've tried to do it.
I know in Zen, they say like you start with the counting, and then you do the counting for a while, and then you focus on the breath, and then eventually you reach a point where you have like shikantaza, which is like just sitting.
Yeah, well, so in the kind of practice that we're doing, we're using the noting. You're noting the breath in and out, and then you're also noting the distractions, like thinking or whatever. Now, if at some point your concentration reaches a point where you don't need the note to stay present, drop the note. But at some point, you will get scattered and then reintroduce the note. The note is just a tool. It isn't the object of your meditation. The object of your meditation is the experiences that are coming up while you're meditating. The note is just a tool to help you be present for those experiences.
So what I'll tend to do is I'll tend to like start with the counting at first, and then I'll go into focusing on the breath, and then at the very end, when I feel like I've gotten the focus, like to the point where I'm not losing track of anything, then I'll go into open awareness at that point, because that's where I can actually sustain the open awareness.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, all these things it's a question of awareness, it's a question of mindfulness, and all these things are tools for allowing you to establish that kind of mindfulness. And it's just developing the skill and using these tools. But the ultimate aim for insight meditation, which is what we're talking about here, is experiencing what's going on in your mind and body and learning to see it in a way which is consistent with what we started out with in this class, I guess 3 weeks ago or whatever, when we started, which is seeing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. And I wanted to finish this class, we've got a few minutes left, I want to finish this class delving into those 3 things in a little more detail. We've talked about them a lot, so what that really means. And the easiest one for most people is impermanence. When I say, everything in your experience is impermanent, I don't usually get any contradiction on that. It's pretty obvious that that's true. But what's not obvious is what happens when we try to base our source of happiness on things that are impermanent. And that's what we typically do. It's sort of, the term I've used is, our source of happiness is arranging the world to be the way we want it to be. And even though everything is impermanent and everything is going to change, we still have the effort of trying to get things set up to be what we want them to be. And because of impermanence, they're changing. And then that becomes kind of a struggle to keep everything in place once we've got it set up. Is there anyone who has not had that experience? I mean, it's just generally the way people do things. So all this meditation is asking you to do is to watch that process, to watch yourself do that. Just like in my example at the beginning of this class, where somebody said something complimentary, I took it and built up an image from that of myself as, you know, somebody who was great. And then I had to maintain that, right? Because it becomes something that you've got to maintain. And it's because it's impermanent. You know, the next day somebody's going to say something not complimentary, and then it's going to be in the opposite direction. So if I base my happiness on that, then I'm going to be swinging back and forth. What they call the 8 worldly winds. I've talked about that many times. The gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, and fame and ill repute. The 2 sides of everything. So in this case, it's praise and blame, right? So somebody says something complimentary, I'm way up, and then the blame comes, and then I'm back down again. So at some point, if you get tired of swinging back and forth, you recognize that keying your happiness on these kinds of transient things is not the best strategy. So that's the impermanence part of it. So the second one is awkwardly translated as unsatisfactoriness. It's a hard word, but the Pali word is dukkha. And we usually just use dukkha because that sounds better than unsatisfactoriness. But the point of that is that let's say that something is very pleasant and you're experiencing something very pleasant. There can't be a downside to that, right? Well, there is in the sense, because of this unsatisfactoriness, there's always a sense that even if you have the world arranged perfectly to be what you want it to be, there's a background hum of fear that's going to slip away. So even if it hasn't slipped away, there's still that sense, that tension, that feeling that it's going to slip away, which keeps it from being pure pleasure, right? And the other aspect of that is that if you have some idea in your head about what would make you happy and you set out to get the world set up that way and you succeed, you may just as well find that your concept of what would make you happy was wrong. It doesn't make you happy. Because as soon as you get things set up one way, your mind is off somewhere else. There's something else that's needed. There's always something else that's needed. So that's this disillusionment. You know, the thing says that if you see these things with wisdom, you turn away from suffering. And it's sometimes translated as you're disillusioned with suffering. You get tired of this routine. But you only get tired of this routine if you can actually see it in process. And that's what this meditation does, is it allows you to see it in process. And you realize what you're doing. And the third element is not self. And that is the sense of, our sense of self has in it a sense of control. I mean, the whole idea of a self is the self is in control. And it soon becomes clear that that isn't true. This whole idea of self is, you know, it doesn't deliver You can create an image of yourself, you can create all kinds of things, but those are just as transient, those are just as hard to hold together as anything else. So these three things are what you see with wisdom through this process. And when you see with wisdom, you turn away from suffering, which means you let go of this. Does that make sense? No comment about that?
This seems really hard to implement.
Well, it
in a
is,
concrete world, because I'm
yeah, and
from nature, I've been born into this existence and to try to survive. And so it's just, I struggle a lot because my mind is constantly thinking about what I have to do to be able to have food and shelter,
mhm.
job.
Yeah, but you
consistency.
see, but thinking about what you need to do isn't the problem. Because as long as you're focused on what you're bringing to this task, you're fine. It's only when your mind has gone to the result. If I do this, then I'll be happy. That's where the problem arises. So if your focus is totally on the task you're doing all the things you just said, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your life, if your task is on the process, what you're doing, then you're fine. It's only when we get into a focus on a result. Like when I was giving this example where the result was for me to have this image of myself as this great teacher or something. If I just do the teaching, that's not a problem. There's no problem there.
And so there's no problem with living life.
There's no problem with living life. There's no problem with taking care of all your aspects of life. As long as you're focused on what you're bringing to each moment instead of what you're getting out of it.
I think part of my personal situation is the fear of losing those things. And then
But you see, and
to
that's,
be out of control.
yeah, that fear of losing those things you're focused on the result, you're focused on the future. But if your focus is on the things that you're doing, you'll do them better than you ever could when your mind is off in some other future result, right? I think the example I've always given in here is if you have two students that are taking a SAT test, and one student is just doing the math problem, totally focused on doing the math problem, whereas the other student is thinking about whether they're going to get into Harvard or not. Who's going to do better on the SAT test? Probably the student that's totally focused on the work at hand. And we can do the same thing with everything that we are doing. If our focus is on the work at hand and what we're doing, and the qualities of mind that we're bringing to this, if we're bringing loving kindness and generosity and goodwill and compassion and these kinds of qualities to mind to what we're doing, then we're doing the best that we can. And any thought about the result won't change anything at all. Does that make sense?
But isn't dukkha, like when you're talking about this, isn't dukkha, so yeah, you can be in the moment watching a dish and whatnot, but underneath, there's